Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to episode 2 of Kinaway TV. I'd like to start this episode off by acknowledging the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. My name's James Brown. I'm relatively new to the Kinaway team. I've joined the team about 3 or 4 months ago as an economic broker, all about procuring opportunities for our members. Obviously, it's been a bit difficult at the moment with everything that's happening with this pandemic. So it's been a lot about offering support to our businesses and getting us in a good position so we can move out of this pandemic whenever that might be and really progress after that. So for episode 2 today, we have Shantelle Thompson here again presenting. Episode 1 was about the warrior within. She touched on some things about how to be, lead and serve from the heart. And there's some really useful tips there that applied, I think personally and also professionally as well to a lot of our members. So some really helpful stuff there. And in today's webinar, it's going to be about grit and grace. She's going to touch on things such as what is grit and grace, and how do we build on grit and grace, and how do we incorporate that into our lives. Again, I think that can be applied probably both personally and professionally. So I hope everyone enjoys the show. Please leave a like and subscribe to Kinaway TV, whether that be through Facebook or through YouTube. Feel free to leave comments, any questions as well for Shantelle, and we'll be sure to address them after the presentation. So hope everyone enjoys.
Thanks, James. I would like to begin by acknowledging and paying my respects to the traditional custodians of the land on which we are meeting today. And for me, that's the Kulin Nations. And I pay my respects to elders, both past, present and emerging. And I pay my respects to all our Melbourne cross country and to people that have made time to join us today and commit your time, because it's a really big thing, particularly with doing more Zooms, more learning, more workshops. It can be really tiresome, and I know some people would much prefer in person. And exactly what James said, a lot of what I share is from lived experience, and some of it I've learnt, I've gone and studied academically, but it more applies to how I've put that into practice in my life through my life experience of being a First Nations woman, being a fair-skinned First Nations woman, being a mum, overcoming mental illness, managing mental illness, and through my practice of being a martial artist. And a lot of the stories I have come from my childhood and my life experience, but also stepping into business and how I became a 3-time world champion of a sport that I started for mental health. And for that to have happened, I had to really rely and lean into my culture and trust in my ancestors, because I didn't always have a roadmap. I always had this feeling in my heart, and it's like, this is where you're meant to go. And sometimes it was more about a compass or a feeling of going, this is the direction I need to move in. I know where I'm headed, but how do I get from where I am now to where I want to get to? It was often unknown and is unknown. And that, to me, I am grateful for and acknowledge my ancestors for their guidance and what they have left behind. And with that, that's how we come to grit and grace. Through my journey, I've always been referred to as resilient. Now, resilience to me is the ability to feel your way back up after a fall. It's the ability to get back up, and some people do that naturally, like it's just something within them that's innate, that they're naturally resilient, either through life experiences or through who they are as a person. And then other people learn it along the journey, and it's that ability to face a challenge, You might fail, or you fail and you are able to get back up again, and you have this evidence base. Whereas I found grit more recently, and to me, grit is about a combination of skills, of courage, of resilience, of passion, and having that drive to go after big goals. So it's not just a small goal, it's those big long-term goals that sometimes you don't know how the road is going to play out. You don't know what the stops are going to be along the way, but you have this vision, you have this fierceness and this relentless drive to go after it. And it's not always going to be fun. You're not always going to have motivation. You're going to need discipline. And grace is something that I'm learning. And to me, grace is about the ability to have that self-awareness, to know when to fight, how to fight, and how to get back up again after you've been at this for a little while. So it's something that comes after you've been on the journey for a while. And the two photos that I've picked for this particular slide is because it's like pushing a rock uphill, or it's like sitting in shit. And I often say that when we're in the shit and we have the courage to stay there, that's when we can use it to plant seeds. It makes really good manure, and you never know what is going to grow from those seeds that you plant. And it's having the courage to take one step at a time. But with the sun setting or rising behind the person, it's knowing that there's always a new day, that at the end of the day, it's about sitting and reflecting on where you're at and going, what can I do tomorrow? And sometimes it's about looking for that lighthouse, or being that lighthouse in the storm, either for yourself or for other people. So grit is something that I followed through Angela Duckworth, and Angela is a leading expert in this area, and she came across grit when she wanted to know why some kids are more successful than others. She was a corporate person, and then she went into teaching, and she got really curious as to know what leads some kids to be able to be more successful than others. And it was more than just about talent. This definition of grit is passion and perseverance for long-term and meaningful goals. It is the ability to persist in something you feel passionate about and persevere when you face obstacles. This kind of passion is not about intense emotions or infatuation. Having grit means you persevere towards a goal that is difficult, but not foolishly impossible. Now, I agree with that, but I also don't. To me, it is about intense emotions, but it's about being able to channel those intense emotions in a way that can support you over time. And a goal that has supported me, the why has been so deep that I've been able to deal with the challenges, or I've been able to feel my way back up, as Brene says, as Brene Brown says, after you've had a fall, is the next generation. And being able to sit with them and sit with integrity to say, I know what I'm talking about because I've got the lived experience, and I can share not just the story of how I became the Barkindji Warrior, or how I started a business, or how I went on to win 3 world titles in my early 30s, whilst being a mum of 3 kids, whilst working and while studying, often against other people who more often than not train full-time, or are younger and single and don't have as many balls to juggle in the pursuit of that goal, is knowing that I can sit with you and I can share how I've done that. I've got the evidence base and I've got the story to share of those experiences, but what's more important is how I did that and why I did that. And sitting with these young ones and knowing that they're watching me, but also knowing that our ancestors came before us, that their struggles were different, but they didn't have access to the resources or the time that we're in now. So I can use those lessons and hold that knowledge close in knowing that it can be done, that it is possible, but also knowing why I'm doing it. I'm trying to break down the barriers. I am creating self-determination and economic empowerment through business, but also through my lived experience of who I'm being. It's not just about what I'm doing or the service I'm providing, but for me, it's very, very important to be grounded in being the message that I'm bringing to the world and living from that space. That's how I work. And in this particular time when you may have lost your business, you may have lost your job, and we're not out of the thick of it yet. Victoria is experiencing some challenges in cluster outbreaks, and that can be really scary. We're seeing people buying and stocking up again, and we're seeing supermarkets having to put boundaries on how much we can buy because people are buying more than they need. And we're also, there's predictions that the recession's going to get worse before it gets better. And that means once JobKeeper and payments like that stop, how are we going to keep going forward if you've lost your job? Qantas is about to let go of 6,000 people. It's really uncertain times, and it's okay if you're feeling lost, stuck, or overwhelmed. And depending on how deep those emotions are will predict what are some of the steps that you should take next, whether you need to seek professional help and being able to create breathing space, because when we're in flight or fight mode, when we're in survival mode, it can be really hard to create that breathing space to be able to make conscious, empowering decisions that are going to move us forward and that aren't going to be detrimental to us. And for me, that's why grit was a really important aspect. And it's a skill. It's something that can be learnt. It's something that everyone can apply to themselves in a way that is meaningful and relevant to themselves at this point in time, because it's a combination of skills, and it's about that long-term picture. It's about going, why did I get into business? What was at the core of what drove me to start this journey? And what are the next steps available to me? Now, if anyone's comfortable, I'd really love to know if you could put into the chat box kind of what was your long-term vision before COVID, and is that still accessible for you, or are you having to create a new long-term vision based on the reality of where things are at, but also what's sitting deep inside your heart? Like, what's something that you're willing to get back up and fight for at this current point in time that could allow you to manage the disappointments and the challenges of now, but that could also help you find that extra little bit of passion or ignite that fire again, or that bit of resilience to go, okay, I've had my struggles. This is where I'm at. I'm going to take a big deep breath, and I'm going to sit down and I'm going to look at what are my options over the next 3, 6, 12 months, and how can I kind of stay in the fight to be able to just take that next step. So if anyone has any questions or comments, I'd really love to hear your thoughts on kind of whether you identify with grit or whether you've had an experience where that has come up, or any questions around that as a concept and how it's relevant, because everything I talk about is relevant to both your personal and professional experience of life. And to me, it's about building a skill set that allows you to navigate and weave together those two things, because the reality is that with working from home and technology, those lines are blurring as to when is work time and when is home time, when's family time, when is self time. So how can we create processes and grow skills that are going to allow us to navigate where we're going next? And grit is both a trait and a skill. It's a skill that can be learned and practiced, and it's often connected with perseverance. And perseverance is that ability to get up every day and go, what's something I'm going to do today to work towards that bigger goal? It's not just about getting caught up in the messiness of the everyday. It's also about being able to balance what needs to be done now, but also having that long-term vision of going, am I just being busy, or am I moving myself closer towards and building capacity and ability to be able to be prepared to take on that big dream or that big goal or that vision that I have, either for yourself as a person, for your family, for your career, or for your business. And how during this time can perseverance help you? Resilience is the ability to bounce back after adversity, and having that knowledge within yourself that regardless of what comes along in the journey, I know I have the capacity and the skills to get back up again. Ambition, going, what is my big goal? Like, what is the big dream that I have? And how can I go from having that big dream that in entrepreneur terms, and I'm just understanding the more academic side of things and finding the language to articulate what I've done as a process and learnt through my experience in jiu-jitsu it's called backwards by design. And it's, you start where you want to end up. You don't start where you are, because sometimes starting here can be very limiting. It can be very much about, well, what's possible? I only see these things, and you're starting with the problem. Whereas where you're starting with the possibilities, or what is the goal, what is the dream, then you can work backwards and go, okay, what do I need to do to get from where I am now, who I am, what I have in front of me, and being realistic in the now. But when you're planning and you're thinking about what's ahead, you're being guided by the vision that you have, but you're starting where you are. And for me, jiu-jitsu has been a minefield, it's been a battlefield, but it's also been the greatest gift in terms of having a place to learn and to show up to. When you have someone on top of you that is 30, 40 kilos more heavier than you, and they are literally trying to squeeze the air out of your lungs, it's very easy to tap out. And when you first start, you do tap out just from having someone's weight on top of you, because you've never had that physical experience of being squashed. But we've all had that emotional experience of being so overwhelmed by life or an experience that we just feel like we're drowning, and we just want to tap out, like we just want to give up. And the reality is, for some people, that they do, that it just becomes too much. But when you allow yourself to experience these things in manageable doses, you learn over time that you can grow your capacity, you can grow your ability to withstand things for a longer time. And that to me is where grit has come in. That journey of jiu-jitsu has allowed me to have the physical experiences to express myself emotionally, and to learn the two different skills together has been really beneficial in being able to translate that to, what does that look like in business? What does that look like in parenting? What does it look like in community and showing up in those spaces? And for me, having big dreams and being ambitious allows me to not be limited or defined by the struggles of the moment. And for me, achievement it's just a process. It's something that allows me to have targets to aim for, but I don't tie my self-worth or my sense of self to my achievements. Those are just outcomes and feedback. Like, I think it's been really important for me to learn, especially being very achievement orientated and very big goals, wanting to achieve high things and always pushing for that next level. It's been very important to sit within that and go, I am enough as I am, and I have a sense of self-worth, and I know what that means for me. And my self-worth and me being enough as a human being is not tied to my achievements. Now, it's not always that simple, and it takes work to do it. But if you're willing to show up and do the work and put in the effort to apply these things to your own life and to your own experiences, who knows what the potential is for where you can go next. And there are seen to be 5 kind of key characteristics of grit, and it's courage is one of them. And I spoke about courage quite heavily in The Warrior Within, and every skill that I have or topic that I speak to, they're all intertwined. Like, they can be separated and done one at a time, but when put together, they create the platform and the foundation to be able to achieve anything or become anything and go after anything that is important to you. And success is a very personal thing. I think it's very important to understand what is our personal definition of success or meaning. What does life look like if you're coming from the heart, not just being guided by your head or what society tells you or what your ego is telling you, but at the core of it, what are your values? What's really important to you? And if you could only do a few things really well, what would those things look like? And being conscientious it's being thorough, it's being intentional, it's being deliberate. So Angela Duckworth talks about practice and hours of practice, but it's about deliberate practice. So it's this cycle of when you choose to show up to practice your skills or perform at work or at home, whatever is the arena that you're in at the moment, it's about having a goal or a deliberate skill that you're trying to work on at the moment, and having a process to be able to reflect on the effort that you've put in that time. What has been the learning, and what are you going to do differently next time to either learn from what didn't work or to improve on what is working? And it's that perseverance to show up, it's the resilience to get back up again, but it's also that passion. It's that why, it's that burning fire inside of you that knows that the big thing that you're going after, and you might have a couple of big things. I'm a person who has multiple areas of importance to me in my life, because it's really important to understand that as Aboriginal people, we are a part of community, and a lot of us go into business because we want to help community. We want to break that cycle of intergenerational trauma, and we want to be able to live self-determination. And a lot of us that are in business are understanding that business is the vehicle with which we can do those things, and access those things that we might not be able to access in other ways. And that you're a part of community, but community is also a part of you. So when you're not operating at your best, and when you're not able to show up, or you're operating from a very limited place of kind of in survival mode all the time, or you're always overstretched and you're being pulled in multiple directions, that limits your ability to show up as your best and be able to stay in it for the long haul. I think being able to play the long game is very important at a time like now, because we've got multiple fights going on. We've got our own personal fights of how do we show up. We've got our social fights that are happening at the moment. I have young people messaging me going, how do I deal with this person who says that blackfellas get stuff for free? How do I deal with people saying, oh, well, we've had it hard too, so why should you get it any different? Like, why should Aboriginal people have their own university entry programs? Like, if it's really about equality, how come you get Aboriginal only programs and all this sort of stuff? And it's a really hard space to see young mob doing the same fight that we've been fighting for a really long time. And it's that justifying, it's that explaining, it's trying to educate. That's about playing the long-term game. Like, what is the long-term game? And Uluru Statement from the Heart, you're seeing people starting to say it's a movement, it's a community, it's a ground thing. And people that are getting on board this movement are out there educating other people. They've taken that on, and they've committed themselves to have the grit to show up and play that long-term game of the dream of being able to get an Aboriginal voice to Parliament, and that voice, that process of truth, treaty, and voice. And so having the passion or having the fire and understanding what it is you're going after at the different levels of what's important to you, but most importantly is to understand that we as individuals are a part of our wider community. And the more we give our permission to ourselves to be able to be okay, to make sure that we're operating from a cup that's overflowing, or we're making space for self-care and time, is the best thing we can do for our mob. Because the more we can show up and the more reserves we have that have been filled up by good experiences, like when something positive happens, it's like sitting with that and taking the time to fill your cup up, allows you that when you need to be gritty, when you need to be fierce or relentless, you have the capacity to do so, because you're not drawing from reserves that are overly drained and overly stretched. Now, when people say you can't pour from a cup half empty, or you can only love others as much as you can love yourself, I know that to not be true, or at least in my experience, because I've been able to love my kids even when I wasn't in a position to love myself. I've been able to show up at work and run programs for young men in youth incarceration when I've been struggling with things at home, when I've been struggling with lateral violence or my own mental health. I've still been able to show up in those spaces, but it's taken so much more effort, and it's taken so much more effort to recover, that I'm not able to give the energy that I am able and capable of when I've taken the time to identify what is the self-work that I need to do, what is the space I need to take for myself to have my health and fitness on point, what foods do I need to eat so that my body is nourished and my brain can work at the level that it needs to. Am I hydrated so that when I show up to speak, my voice is hydrated, my energy levels are high, and I can really get across, especially on a screen when I can't see people, I can't see your reactions, I can't get that energetic feel. So I've almost got to imagine you sitting behind the computer so that I can show up. And to me, that's connected to passion. And how do you gain grit? It's that there are skills that we can do. When you're stuck under someone, like in jiu-jitsu, it's when you're stuck under someone who knows every move, and no matter how many moves you try or what amount of effort you put into, you can't get out from under them. It's how can I take that deep breath and go, okay, panicking isn't going to help me here. Being overwhelmed isn't going to help me here. And thrashing about like crazy is just a big waste of energy, because it's making me feel like I'm doing something, but I'm just getting tired. So in jiu-jitsu, I had to learn how to be able to take a deep breath when someone's on top of me, pinning me to the ground and literally trying to choke me or take my arm and get their submission or get the win. When I'm able to take that breath and go, okay, what do I need to do to get myself safe so I'm not putting myself in danger? But where's the opportunity to take the risk when the opening comes up? So all this happens almost unconsciously in training. But now being a brown belt, I have a much higher level of self-awareness and consciousness of the processes that are happening and the skills that I need to be able to manage those situations. And for me to be able to do that and learn those skills of grit, I had to pursue not just my interests, but it's deeper than that. I had to find what was really important to me at my core. And it's practice. It's about showing up. It's about consistency. And it's about deliberate practice. It's what do I need to do today? What can I do today that's going to allow me to move forward just that little bit? Just that little bit. Because I'm the type of person that I will fill my to-do list up with 20 things and look at it and get so overwhelmed that I'll get distracted and I'll go sit over here. So rather than trying to do everything, I write everything. So I do a brain dump out of my head. And then I go, what's the one thing today that is going to move me forward in my business? And it could be about making that sales call. It could be about working on the back end of my website to ensure that my website is up to date. There's always something that we can do to either work on the business or working in the business to generate some revenue, or it could be going back to scratch and working on ourselves so that we're in a better position to be able to show up and perform when the next opportunity comes. So sometimes it's about sitting with the current state of things and creating the space to be able to learn with that and kind of being okay with where you are while you start to take the steps to work towards where you want to be next, and looking at what are the opportunities that are in front of me, because it might not always show up in the way that you wanted to or in the way you envisioned. But when you give yourself that permission to go, okay, I'm going to sit with this, I'm going to figure out what are the next steps to get to where I want to get to, or so that I can stay in this game until the next opportunity comes up. And that's where it's being connected to a higher purpose of going, for me personally, I'm in business so that I can support my family, and business allows me to have the space to and the flexibility so that I can still train, and I don't have to ask an employer for permission for time off, to apply for time off to go to a competition or to go and be with my kids during school holidays. I can better balance my time. But it's also a vehicle for me to reach more people and to add value to programs that other people are running. Like, I've reached out to people and say, hey, I know you're running this youth program. I can facilitate a session within your bigger program. So right now it's giving me a means to be able to balance the priorities of my life. It's giving me a means to show up, but it's also giving me a starting point to be able to create financial opportunities to support my family. Being a self-funded athlete is really difficult because you see so many opportunities out there, but sponsorship is really hard to get, and it's about relationships. But a lot of the time, I don't have the time to build those relationships, to go and knock on those doors and start those lengthy processes, because I'm already stretched so thin. So for me, it was about going, what is a sustainable way that I can balance my training load, being a mum, and also needing to be in community? And that for me was business. But then I had to get even more deep on this and going, what can I do now that's going to add value to the people that I work with and allow me to have impact and teach and share the knowledge that I have from being an athlete, from being Aboriginal, from being a mum, and being in business and going and being a teacher. Like, what is it that I can give that's a value and that the world needs? It's not necessarily about just what I want to do. It's about, what does the world need right now and what can I do to meet that need? And it's about hope. It's about going, I trust that, and having faith in yourself that the ancestors have your back, that you're not in this alone, and that if you're willing to show up and you're willing to work with from where you are. I had a coaching call this morning, a ancestral slap across the head by a very, very dear friend who I had this question and I was kind of stuck, and I rang her and we spent an hour unpacking that. And it was that I know I'm being called to go to that next stage, but for some reason I feel very blocked. And it comes back to my trauma of I'm scared of that next level of success. And that if I go there, that my family or people that I love or people that I want to have in my life will not be there to support me. They won't come on that journey with me, and that I'll have to go alone into that next part. And we unpack that and how the behaviors that I'm doing now are triggered by my life experiences and my trauma from when I was younger. And by creating that safe space, I've been able to cultivate that hope of going, one, I've shown myself that I'm not alone. I have had someone to create a safe space for me to go there and unpack that, because when you try and force something and there's a blockage there and you just try and smash through it, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And that's where I've been able to create some hope. I've been able to create some breathing space. I've been witness to what I'm experiencing, but now I have a plan. Like, I have the next steps of what I need to do to be able to move through this, not avoid it. And that's where surrounding yourself with gritty people really matters as well. Because even though I'm in this fight on the mat with this other person, I've had team members who have helped me prepare. I've had a coach who's been able to push me to the absolute brinks of my limitations and take me further than I thought I could take myself. And then I've had teammates be able to help me up when I'm laying on the ground, so that when I go into this fight, I'm prepared, but I'm might be physically there alone, but spiritually, emotionally, and preparation-wise, I'm never alone. And I think talent is nothing more than unmet potential if you don't have the grit to show up. You can have all the talent in the world and you can have all the opportunities in the world, but if you're not willing to show up and do the work, and you're not willing to ask those questions and have the courage to go there and do the hard stuff, it's not going to mean anything. For me to be able to get to the point when I first decided that I was going to be a world champion, or at least try to be a world champion, I didn't even believe it was possible. But then when I started to lean into the idea of what if it was possible? What if I just decided to try? What if I just took that next step? And I started to share that with people around me. I was met with disbelief. I was met with mockery, and other people tried to shut me down. And the more people tried to shut me down, the more determined I came to be to find out for myself whether it was possible. And I was willing to put in the work. I didn't know what the work was at the time. I didn't know what would be the sacrifice. I didn't know what the costs were. But the why was big enough for me to take that risk to find out. And for Angela Duckworth, her work is something that I'm using a lot of this to learn from, is that talent and IQ are not the best indicators for success. Grit combined with those things can take you a lot further. And if you're not naturally talented, or you don't have a high IQ, or whatever it is you think you need in order to succeed and get to where you want to get to, it's not always necessary. If you're willing to show up and do the work, and you have the grit, the resilience, the courage to be able to show up and do whatever it takes to get to where you want to get to, and you're willing to walk that journey, you can get there. And that passion and being able to be willing to fail and see failure as a learning opportunity is really important, because when I started this journey, I never had a roadmap to show me that it could be done. I'd never had anyone in my life experience on TV or in my personal circles that had gone on to do what I wanted to do, or so I thought. But my grandmother had role modeled for me what it meant to have a dream and to put in the work to get to that dream. She showed me what it took. It took work. It took the courage to show up. But if she'd been limited by people telling her that she couldn't own her own house, or that she couldn't manage a family, raising a family, having a family business, and also working a side job to be able to have her dream of having her own house, if she'd been limited by that, she would never have done the things that she needed to do to get to that dream of being able to be independent for herself and being able to be self-determined, creating the ability, the economic freedom to be able to be self-determined and create her own path, was something that was role modeled to me by my grandmother. And it was from that lesson unconsciously that I was able to go, I wonder if I could be a world champion. I wonder what it would take to get there. And instead of sitting back just wondering and going, well, what if, I went to find out for myself. I have face planted on international TV. I have been dumped on my head. But I've also gotten to travel to Tokyo, to New Zealand, to Tahiti, to Africa. I've been on the national team. And grit has allowed me to get there, being grounded by purpose. And so for me, where I would suggest you start with this is sitting with yourself and going, well, what's in my heart right now? Like, what's still calling to me? What is a why? What is a purpose? What is a dream or a vision that you still have underneath all the pain, underneath all the anger and the overwhelm? If you can create space away from that to go, what do I want for myself? But also, what am I being called to do? And then having a process to sit and unpack that, and then going, okay, well, where am I now? And what would be the steps that I would need to take to get there? Even if it's just the next step. What's the process? What's the deliberate practice that you need to create? You might have to do some work to get there. Like, is it new skills that you need to get a new job? Is it about taking on some training to be able to build your business to the next level? I'm doing a lot of work on myself and on the business so that when speaking gigs come back up, when live events come back up, I'm working a lot. I've been challenged to show up a lot more and do more of these things, but do it live, do 10-minute deep dives into what I know on social media, so that when those opportunities come back up and people start looking for people who go, who could we get to speak on this thing on resilience or courage? My name is at the top because I've done the work to make sure that I'm there. I'm showing up and I'm doing the work to be prepared so that when that next opportunity comes up, I have the skill and the capacity to be able to do that. And when I nurture myself and I do the work that needs to be done to be prepared, I'm planting seeds and building capacity to hand something to the next generation. So when I show up as my best self, that has ripple effects into our community, because whether you're Aboriginal or not, you're a part of a community. And how you show up affects that community, but how your community is showing up also affects you. So it's this two-way exchange that goes, but where do you start? We can't control community. We can't control society. It's always, you always see, go back to what you can control. And by you doing the work to develop skills like grit, to find out more about the warrior way, the warrior within, and to be led by your dreams, not your fears, but be willing to show up now as you are, to go, what's just that next step that I need to take? You will put out ripple effects that empower your community. It creates a different energy. It starts to create a momentum of change because you are being the change that you need to see in your own world. You're showing up for yourself in a way that will allow you to show up for others in the way that they need you to show up, whether it be for your family, your employer, your employees, your business, or your community. And by you being that change and choosing to take on that role of, I need to be the leader that I want to see, that has ripple effects. It allows others to show up for themselves because you're role modeling that. You can also teach that through your actions and who you're being. And that allows us to create space for the next generation and those that look to us for guidance. And that's some of the lessons that have come from being the Barkindji Warrior, from being a businesswoman, and from being in the journey that I'm in now. And we've got plenty of time left, and I wanted this to be much more about what other people wanted to ask. Like, what are the questions that you'd like to learn? Like, or what are some of the questions that you might have around grit? So chocolate on purpose, combining chocolate with our Indigenous plants is my respect to elders, both past and present, by sharing the wisdom of their use of our Indigenous plants with the world. That is such a powerful thing, Jo. Thank you for sharing, because you're taking the things that our ancestors know, you're taking your knowledge and bringing that into the world and sharing that. And I think that's one of the ways that we can create change, is by showing mainstream Australia and Western culture has never really respected or opened up a space for Indigenous people to bring forth their knowledge, to show how it is of value and impact and worth to the modern day world. We know this, but that space hasn't been opened up. By being in business and by you walking this journey and creating that product and that service, there's a story, there's a history behind that. I think that takes a lot of grit. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, so because of COVID, your outlets have disappeared and no visitors to your retail outlet. So is there a way you could start to share the story of your business on Facebook, like through the platforms that you have available to you now? Um, are there opportunities to look at who has a reconciliation action plan and look for corporate or government avenues to interact with people online or in spaces like this to go, I have this product, is because I know that now that it's the end of financial year, people are looking for gifts and stuff like that. So could it be that you could take a different marketing strategy or look at where you can advertise and share the story and build that new potential market or opportunity for your business? Yeah, and that's the thing. If you start talking about your struggles and you start talking about the history of your product and why you're in business, you're right. It allows other people to engage, because I have found that one-on-one and away from the publicity or the openness of social media, through inboxes and safe chat groups and stuff like that, people do want to know, they just don't know where to start. So by you being willing to open up those opportunities and have those discussions, it can be a two-way learning process. So Jane has said, even though it's an amazing gift to be able to work from home, the struggle with the working from home model for her is that you become invisible. There is a significant feeling of unrewarded capacity. Jane, could you just unpack that a little bit more for me, that what you mean by unrewarded capacity? Is it that you don't feel like you're being acknowledged for the work the work that you're putting in, or that you don't have that physical space, that physical feedback and that energy feedback of the work that you're putting in and the energy you're putting in towards your role and the work that you do? Because yes, particularly as Aboriginal people, but humans, a lot of us are very social creatures. Human beings are built for connection. So you might have heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And at the top is self-actualization, where you're in a position and you're like, I'm living my purpose and I'm fully in flow and connection with myself and I'm showing up as myself completely. And at the bottom, it has food, water as the basic foundations of survival. Underneath that is something even deeper than food and water. It's belonging. We need that sense of belonging to be able to show up. Like, people will literally kill to know that they belong. That's how we end up in cults. That's how we see gangs form. Like, these kids, they want to belong, and that's where they identify themselves. That's where they see themselves. You'll see women will go really quiet with their voices just so that they're not seen as being angry or too emotional, just so that they can fit in and have a sense of belonging. So yeah, it's that physical presence, that feeling of being connected to people is such an important part that this working from home model really challenges. And as much as we're creating new ways of connecting online, it also challenges that need for human connection, in-person connection. So yeah, it's balancing that. How do you get the balance right if you're a business or if you're a corporate or you have a lot of staff? How do you create that balance of going, we want to give that flexible work environment, especially now that we've had the biggest live experiment of this working from home remote working model across the globe, and that need for interpersonal connection, that need for the energy of people in a room. Can't hear you. There you
How's
go.
that? There we are.
Much better.
Yeah, I just want to thank you again for your time today. Some really valuable content there, which I'm sure our members really appreciate and apply. And it's really encouraging as well to see some of our members engaging and asking some really good questions too. So I want to thank you, and I want to thank everybody for tuning in today and asking some really good, healthy questions. Obviously, next week, same time, we have the third webinar that you'll be presenting, and that's going to be around the courage, confidence, and purpose, touching on why does it matter, how does it serve us, and how can we build those into our lives as well. So again,
I'll be finishing with that, because it's that now that we've talked about the more, I guess, the feeling sort of stuff, that higher order stuff, is what's the practical way that people can create a roadmap from where they are now to kind of where they want to go, and being able to navigate the next 6 months, 12 months of uncertainty, but by coming back to what's within their control. And I just want to say thank you to everyone for trusting us, and to Kinaway for the opportunity, but to everyone that showed up today. I'd really love to know a key takeaway. If you could post it on the video, share this content with someone. But the best way to learn something and implement something is by teaching it to someone else or sharing it. So if you got something out of today, help us by sharing it. Share with us what you've learned, or sharing it with other people. And I hope to see you all here next week.
Sure. And again, yeah, it is really relevant, these webinars that you are presenting. So we do appreciate time, and I'm sure all the members do as well. Appreciate these webinars. So again, that's it for today's webinar. I just want to thank everybody for tuning in. Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and also click the bell for the notification, so you don't missing out on any more of these webinars. So once again, have a wonderful weekend, everybody, and we'll see you same time next week.
See you, mob. Have a deadly weekend.